Hey everybody, thanks for stopping by. It's Lyle from Hooked on Niagara Guide Service, and today I wanted to do a quick video sharing a few helpful tips that will hopefully help you catch more trout next time you're fishing the Niagara River. Today I'm going to be discussing a couple different rigs that I like to use and a couple different ways to think about how you present baits to trout when things get a little bit tough or if you're not catching and you see other boats around you catching. These are tips that I use all the time, little tricks, just little ways of doing things different, and I wanted to share them with you today. So before I get into sharing any kind of rigs or different presentations that I use, I want to just go over quickly a few things that I consider whenever I'm fishing, especially if I haven't been on the water for a few days. These are the things that I'm thinking about before I tie up for my customers. So the first thing would have to be water quality or water clarity. So depending on the color of the water, that's going to dictate the colors that I use and also the size of the baits that I use. Typically, if you steelhead fish in streams, you know that on days where it's a little bit muddier, you want to use a little bit bigger baits, and when it's clear, you want to use smaller baits. So that's sort of the basis. That's the first thing that I look for. Then apart from that, I start to experiment with whether I'm using one or two baits. And if you fish on a creek or on the river from shore, you know that a lot of times that when you're float fishing, your rig just seems to work a lot better when you have two baits. So bottom bouncing is no different, and a lot of times I'll use Tandem. And that's either a Tandem bead bag, corky bag, bead streamer, corky streamer, yarn, whole mix. Really use anything on a Tandem rig. But I'll show you that right now. And what I've got here is a Tandem yarn rig. And I've tied it with two pink yarns. You know, you can mix that up. I don't think I'd ever run two exactly the same color like this. I might keep them both pink, but I probably wouldn't have the exact same color. But what you can see here is that you've got two baits on your line. And I tie this with an egg loop knot on the bottom and then also on the top one. I've got a video that I'll link right here so that you can check that out if you don't know how to tie that knot. But essentially what I'm looking for here is obviously two baits, two chances to catch a fish, but you also start to get into the attractor phenomenon, which is where sometimes one bait attracts the fish and gets him engaged, and the other one seals the deal. And typically when I'm running a Tandem rig like this, throughout the day, if you start getting bit on it, you'll notice that the fish will be on one color specifically. And I've had it out there where when you change the attractor bead or yarn or whatever it is that you're not getting bit on because you're thinking, oh, well, they don't want that. Once you change that, they stop biting the other one. So trout are very tricky. And you've probably had days out there where you're thinking, oh man, like these fish, they're not biting. But you know, you may see other guys getting them. Start playing around with that and consider the attractor factor. Sounds pretty good. So that's with Tandem yarns. You can also do the same thing with a bead and yarn. Just a word about that. Typically when I'm using these rigs, I don't want to have the heavier item on the bottom hook. So in an instance where you have bead and yarn as your Tandem setup, I always want to have my bead as the top and my yarn on the bottom. And that's because this is gonna track a little bit straighter in the water, whereas the yarn might do some of this, right? Because it's very light. So if I had it the other way, then my yarn would just be going through the water and my bead would also be doing the same. So a lot of times I think that the yarn, the way that it moves in the water and the fact that it's almost buoyant, has a different appeal to the fish whenever they're checking out two baits. So that's another rig that you can use, is a bead or a corky and then yarn on the bottom. So that's another Tandem rig. And then finally I want to talk about using a single object, so whether that's yarn, beads, or roe. When you're tying this up, I would go for a snell or an egg loop knot so that your line sits straight with the hook and so that it's not pivoting around as it would with a uni knot or a fisherman's knot. So you can experiment with beads, obviously color and size. They make them all the way up to, I believe, 14 or 16 millimeters. So yeah, play around. Any different day, you know, the fish might be on one color and not on another one. So get a lot of beads, mix them up, experiment. That's the fun of trout fishing. It's almost like a bit of a science experiment. Guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you found it helpful. If you have any questions about what I'm talking about, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'm excited for this winter because I've got season 2 of the Love of Fishing podcast coming out. It's something I've been working hard on already, and I can't wait to bring it to you guys, hopefully later in the winter. So if you aren't already, please subscribe. Stay tuned on everything that's coming up here. Other than that, guys, stay safe, stay well, stay healthy, and get outside and go fishing. Peace.
What in heaven's name have you done? You broke in the speed and the sound of the